We're going to get started here. Good evening. This is Jim Zazowski, president of Z1 Career Zone and founder. And first of all, I want to apologize about the technical difficulty for whatever reason it has delayed us to a 5:15 start time. So if there's people that have fallen off this, we are recording this session and we'll make sure that that's taken care of. So anyway, first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to really the first of what are 15 webinars that we're doing that we've got scheduled through the first quarter of 2021. And we're really excited for what we have in store for you today with Mark Smits. So a couple of housekeeping items I just want to say up front is that on the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there's a few icons. The only one that is activated for this session is the Q&A icon. So if you have questions during Mark's presentation at all, go ahead and click on that, type in your question. We're going to be gathering those through the session, and then we should have enough time, 10 minutes or so, for Q&A. Now, there are a couple hundred people that will be on this webinar, so we won't be able to answer every question, but I promise we'll follow up and as appropriate and get your answers back to you. I also wanted to say, if you have not done this yet, go ahead and pick up your phones and follow us on Instagram, Z1 Career Zone. We're on all the social media outlets, but we're going to continue to have updates for our webinars, for our workshops, and all kinds of things. So go ahead and do that if you haven't done that yet. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Z1 Career Zone, I want to give you a little bit of information on us, okay? And also a little bit about what's in store for 2020. So first off, let me tell you what our mission is here at Z1 Career Zone. And Mark, can you advance that next slide if you don't mind?
I'm gonna have to reload it, Zaz.
Okay, that's okay. Bear with us. Our first webinar. No problem, Mark. Thanks. There we go. Okay, so let me just start with really what our mission is, and for those who aren't familiar with Z1 Career Zone. About 3 years ago when we started this company, our mission was to build what would be the most comprehensive career training program that exists today. And I got to tell you, I absolutely believe that we have accomplished that over the last few years. And but really what we're all about, and it's this that's under our logo there, and it's our tagline, and that is changing lives one career at a time. And I can promise you, everything we're doing, whether it's our programs, whether it's our workshops, or these webinars, it's really all about that. And so let me share with you a few facts that exist right now. And some of these you may be aware of, some of them you may not be aware of. So the first one, Mark, can you advance that next slide, please? The first one is this, is that you will spend about 100,000 hours in your career during your lifetime. And I can promise you there is nothing that even comes a close second to that. So, so this whole career thing is really, really important. Secondly, 71% of all professionals in the US, okay, are either disengaged or don't like what they're doing. Think about that, 71% of all professionals. And then 23%, only 23% of college graduates, okay, are in professional jobs within 12 months of graduation. So is this a problem? You bet it is. And it's these stats that we are dedicated to change. And so getting it right, getting your career right, is it important? You bet it is. And you know this, okay? If you get your career right, it literally changes your life. And I could promise you this, it's going to change the life of your family and those closest to you. And conversely, if you don't get it right, it is absolutely just the opposite. Okay, Mark, next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about real quickly what's in store for 2020, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark. First of all, we just launched our on-demand program, which is our second offering that we have for our clients. Our first offering is our premium program, and that is our online curriculum, 12 modules coupled with a professional coach, very high touch, very high accountability, okay? Our on-demand program, same 12 modules, same curriculum, except we actually couple that with an on-demand class where you have a facilitator there taking you through the program and all that stuff. And really what this on-demand program allowed us to do is, number one, is now our curriculum is available to pretty much everybody can afford it now. Okay, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is it's completely online. So it's flexible. You can do it, take your courses anytime you want, fit it into your work schedule, and already the people that are going through the program are giving us that feedback that they absolutely love that aspect of it. So that's available now. Second is we are going to continue our workshops that we offer throughout the country. We've done over 40 of these. We've done these workshops in colleges, universities, for their alumni associations, groups of anywhere from a low of 50 to upwards of 400. We've done these workshops in churches. We've done them with certain kinds of organizations where there was value there. And then third is what we're doing right now is we are recruiting across the country for distributors. And these are individuals that have outstanding sales and marketing experience, and they're going to be selling our on-demand program to different organizations and groups and so forth like that. In addition, we're going to be adding on facilitators, those people that'll be teaching our on-demand classes, and we're also going to be adding on additional coaches as our demand increases, and we're already seeing that happening. So if you want to know anything more about any of these, what our workshops are about, or job description for any of these opportunities, just go ahead and email us at info@z1careerzone.com, and we will get back to you immediately on that. So last is, I'm really excited about this, is launching our webinar series here. And again, I'm very excited about that. And Mark Smits is kicking that off for us. And his presentation is titled Interview Preparation is Everything. And just a tad about Mark, he's going to talk a little bit more about his background, but I've known Mark for 38 years, which is hard to believe, Mark. And we grew up in corporate America together and worked side by side for several years. And I could tell you, I got a lot of respect for Mark, a lot of respect. And not only what he's accomplished in his career with working executive positions, Fortune 100 companies, and also startups in the corporate world, but I think more importantly is Mark has always been a guy that gives of his time and his expertise to individuals, to other organizations, and absolutely, I've appreciated that over the years and watching that, and that's exactly what he's doing with this webinar, is giving his time and expertise, and our hope, and I'm pretty positive this will happen, is that you'll be able to walk away with a couple of great tools from Mark's expertise as it relates in interview preparation, things like that. So without further ado, Mark, why don't you take it over from here?
Thank you, Jim, and hello to everybody. I understand that I have a lot of friends and some family and past colleagues on the line, and a few people that I don't know, and I look forward to getting to know a little bit better. Hey, before I start talking about interviewing and preparation for interviewing, I just want to do a shout out to Jim Zazowski and the Z1 Career Zone. I think this concept is terrific. In my 35 plus years of working in the industry and interviewing many people and interviewing myself, I recognize that finding the right job for you is a really serious business. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that haven't found the right job for themselves. And part of that is because of the approach that you're taking. And I heard a long time ago that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results. So what Jim and his company is founded on, and the principle that they're pursuing, is to give you the skills that will help you to be better at your job search and looking for a fit that is the right fit for you and your family. and it's a serious business. And when Jim reached out to me and asked me to kick this off, I was very excited to be a part of it, because I know that you spend a lot of time in your work environment, and having the right job is a very fulfilling thing. And so I'm happy to contribute in whatever little way that I can. So thank you for allowing me this time, Jim.
No, thank you, Mark.
All right, so as you can see here, the purpose of my presentation is to help you with interview preparation. And I've had a lot of experience with interview preparation, and I'd like to just share a little bit of that experience with everybody on the line. I want to say before I go any further that I've done my best in this preparation to provide tips that should be compatible with all levels, whether you're a recent college grad or you're an executive that's looking to transition from one company to another. I think some of the things that I'm talking about today should be helpful to you. So let me start by just talking a little bit about myself. Why should you care about me giving you a presentation about interviewing? Well, I spent 35 plus years in the corporate environment, and in that time, I've had the opportunity to interview a large number of people, and I've seen a lot of different interviewing styles and techniques, and I've also had the opportunity in many, many situations to interview myself for jobs. And so I know what it's like to be on both sides of the equation, and I have a good feel for what I think works and what doesn't work. With that said, what I'm going to be talking about tonight is really just a general rule of thumb. It won't work for every situation, but hopefully I'll be able to pass along a few things to help you think so that when you're preparing for that next interview, if you take one or two suggestions from what I'm saying and it helps you to be more successful, then I feel like I've done what I was hoping to accomplish with this presentation. So I said it in the front slide, and I'm going to say it all over again. The most critical part of being successful in interviewing is to make an assessment prior to your interview and to do some homework to get ready for that interview. And when I say make an assessment, I think what I mean by this is that you have to recognize that working for a company is a two-way street. You need to make an assessment for yourself on whether this is the right company for you. You need to know something about yourself. Are you going to be a good fit with that company? Do you believe in what that company is trying to do? Do you believe in the culture of the company? And most importantly, do you believe that the management of the company shares the same core values that you do? Now, how do you know all of this? That's where we're going to go in this presentation, is what kinds of things should you work on, and so that you can make that kind of an assessment. But I want to start first with talking about what's on the mind of the hiring manager, because this is a critical component of whether you're going to be successful or not. And I want to start by saying that you have to recognize that this is a human to human interaction. I know that there's a lot of times in my past where I've gone for an interview and I feel like I'm talking to somebody who is different from me. Either he's more accomplished or more powerful or has a different set of experiences. But at the end of the day, you're making an evaluation of the person that you're talking to, and they're making an evaluation of the person they're talking to. And it's really not that much different than whether you're having a conversation with somebody that you met at a dinner party or at some other casual event where you're trying to figure out if this person fits with you. Now, in the back of his mind, he is definitely looking for the best human being that he can find, but there are a couple other things that are on that person's mind that you have to take into consideration while you're moving forward. And I've got them listed here. I think you all have to recognize that any hiring manager is interested in hiring somebody who they think is the most talented and the best fit for their company. And when I say the most talent and the best fit, I'm talking about that manager at the end of the day is expecting whoever he hires to be a good steward of what that company stands for. You know, if you're in any kind of service industry, he wants to make sure that he's hiring somebody that that supports and demonstrates the value of the company. And that's important to him. And so that is a big assessment that he's trying to make in this process. Now, some other things. Certainly he's trying to reduce risk. Anytime you're a hiring manager and you have a revolving door, it's an expensive proposition, and it definitely hurts your ability to succeed in what you're trying to do, because you're in a constant state of training, you're in a constant state of flux. So when that person is talking to you as the interviewee, he's trying to make an assessment of whether you're going to be a stable influence on the team that he is hiring for. The next item. Certainly the person wants to see if you are going to help him be successful. It's really important that during this process that the manager is trying to figure out what attributes you have that are going to add value to the mission of his team. And if he believes that you have the right attributes to help him be more successful, then you're going to put yourself apart from the other people that are interviewing. Next item, team dynamics. I used to say that I wanted to have good citizens in addition to good salespeople, because I know from watching my sons play sports that you can have a team of all-stars, but if that team doesn't get along with each other and they don't pass the ball effectively or communicate with each other about what defense they're running, if they don't care about each other and if they don't like each other, then they're not going to achieve the kind of success that a less talented team that really does care about each other can achieve. And so that manager is looking to make sure that you're going to be a good part of that team dynamic. He wants to see if you're going to be a good citizen. He's going to be looking at stuff like your communication skill, your ability to handle adversity, your leadership skills, because he's wanting to make sure that you're going to be a positive influence on everybody else on the team. And then finally, most times when a manager has a vacancy, that employee who just left a void of some type, and that void that person left usually creates a problem that has to be solved. And so specifically, that manager may be looking to solve a very specific problem. So those are some of the things that are on the mind of the manager when the manager has you in front of them talking to him in an interview. Now I want to talk about your preparation for the meeting, and then the matching up of your preparation with the opportunity that's in front of you. Let's start with the preparation first. There's really two components of it. The first is research, and the second is rehearsal. When I'm talking about research, I'm talking about your gathering of information about the company, the culture, the hiring manager, and the team. I just got done spending a lot of time talking about that manager and his search for somebody that's going to be a good influence on the team, that's going to have leadership skills, and so on and so forth. So how do you go about this research? It's a really, really critical component. And what I would tell you is that there's all kinds of different ways that you can learn about the company that you want to interview with. One very effective way of talking about the company is to go and talk to customers of that company. Find out about the goods and services that the company is offering and whether customers like it and how they feel about it. Find out how the customers feel about the way the company presents itself. Another good way of finding out about the company and these four things, company, culture, manager, and team, is to do networking. Find somebody that knows somebody that's in the company now, and make your way to a conversation with that person. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. It can typically be done on the internet now, LinkedIn, but find some people that work for the company now and call them and talk to them and find out how they like working for the company, how they like working for the products that they represent, and learn from that. And then finally, another good suggestion I would have for research is the human resources department. I mean, those people are in the business of wanting to make sure that there's stability with their employees. And so that would be a good place to call to talk about the management practices, the culture. What does the company want to be? And use all of this information to guide you in preparing for your conversation with the manager about what that manager wants. Okay, so you've done all of this research, and so now it's important to do some rehearsal. And based on the research that you've conducted, you should be able to come up with a couple of questions that you can anticipate that are going to be asked by the company, about your experience, about the skills that you bring. There's probably a handful of questions that if you brainstormed with somebody, you could probably come up with. There's one that I can say with 99% confidence is almost always asked, and that is, tell me something about yourself. And so one of your rehearsals should be the old-fashioned elevator speech. So this is the time that it takes to go from the first floor to the fifth floor, where you describe yourself as a human being. And that should roll off your tongue. And it should feel very natural when you tell somebody about yourself. And it's really important to rehearse that. I also would tell you that it's important for you to role play. Find somebody that you trust that's going to give you good feedback, and sit down with that person and do a mock interview and have that person look at the way you answer questions, look at the types of answers that you provide, talk to you about the brevity and the clarity of your answers, and do that role play. It's really important. And then the last thing I would tell you in rehearsal is that it is critically important to be yourself. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed with where I can tell from the first time they open their mouth that they're uncomfortable, they're nervous, and they're trying to be something that they're not normally. And I don't have any problem with somebody being nervous as an interviewer. I think it's very natural to be nervous. But I would also tell you that your amount of nervousness will go down dramatically if you've done some research and done some rehearsals. But most importantly, I'm looking for somebody who is going to represent the company as a sincere, genuine human being. And so I want to talk to somebody like I'm talking to somebody that I met in an unwork-related environment, like a dinner party, for example, where I'm asking them some questions and they're asking me some questions, and we're trying to figure out whether we're a good fit for being friends with each other. That's the kind of dialogue that you should be trying to get to in your rehearsal. Okay, now I'm going to move over to the other side of the slide and talk about matching your preparation with the opportunity. And there's three things here that I want to talk about specifically. The first is just generally speaking. Generally speaking, 89% of hiring failures are due to bad attribute fit and not to skills. And my whole life was spent in sales, so that's what's most familiar with me. But I would tell you that if I'm hiring somebody for a sales position, there's probably a 90% chance that that person has decent enough selling skills. That's not really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for are those attributes that help that person be a great salesperson. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about how does the person prepare for a sales call? How does the person handle adversity? How does the person network? How does the person lead? How does he communicate with other people? And so when you're applying for any job, whether it's technical or sales, or whether you're looking for an executive position or right out of college, there's going to be an assumption when you're talking about the skills required for the job that you have those. What's more important is for you to be able to talk about the unique set of attributes that you have that will help you to be the best at that particular position. The best example I can give you is I managed the service department at a large corporation for a couple of years. And it didn't take me long to realize that when we're hiring a service representative, obviously it was really good. It was really important that the person had some technical skills. But it was more important that the person had a set of skills that would allow him to diagnose a problem, to look at something and be able to be spatially aware enough to figure out what do I do here, and then who also had an empathetic communication style because typically if something is not working, that customer is distressed. They're not able to do their job. So having a service representative who was able to communicate effectively with the customer, calm the customer down, reassure the customer, those skills were critically important to us. And it's not really necessarily turning a screwdriver or turning a wrench or replacing a board. And those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about, that if you can describe about yourself, it's going to help you to differentiate yourself. Okay, moving on to the second interlocking circle, individual. It's really important for you to talk about how you're going to add value to the company. You need to be able to talk about the things that have caused you to be successful in the past. And I don't want you to forget about leadership skills. I think even if you're a kid right out of college, I think it's really important for you to talk about how you influence situations. And that's my definition of leadership and as it pertains to interviewing skills. Every company and every position is going to be faced with ambiguity. It's going to be faced with situations where the employee is going to have to make a decision about what to do. And as a hiring manager, if you can hire somebody who isn't going to wait around for you to tell them what to do, but is going to take the initiative and has the leadership and has the type of attributes that cause him to be a go-getter so that they can solve the problem or address the issue without having to wait to be told, that's the kind of person you're looking for. So as an individual, it's critically important for you to be able to describe how you go about that. And, you know, whether it's hard work or problem solving or leadership, being able to go into that interview with a very set list of attributes that have caused you to be successful in the past, and to be able to describe those to who you're interviewing with is really, really important. And then finally, I said that there was going to be times when I'm going to be talking about a specific leadership type of interview. If you're interviewing for a position where you're going to be in charge of other people, I think it's really important for you to be able to describe how you get results and to describe how you influence other people. I know a lot of people go into jobs and they talk about, I did this and I did that, my team did this, my team did that. But what's more important to the person who's interviewing you is, how did you get that result? How did you influence your team? What kind of leadership style do you have? Are you a builder or a teacher or a driver? How do you handle adversity? How do you handle somebody who isn't getting the job done? How do you remediate that? So when you're interviewing for a leadership position, it's one thing to be able to walk in and say, hey, my team exceeded goal for the last 3 years in a row. That's great, but what I want to know is, how did you do it? And I think you have to have a list of factors that led to you being able to get that done. Okay, let's talk about the interview itself. Now, I've already talked about being prepared, and I think that if you are prepared when you go into the interview, you will have a more successful interview because you will be less nervous. And I think knowing a little bit about the company, and especially knowing, if you can, a little bit about the person that you're actually talking to is really, really important. So make sure you're prepared. The second item, it's really important that you turn this interview into a dialogue. All too often, I've had people come in and interview with me where it's almost like they're taking an oral exam. They're waiting for me to ask a question and they're hoping that they can give me the right answer. And I can't tell you how unsuccessful that approach is, because sometimes human beings don't understand other human beings. And so if I ask you a question and you don't really understand what I'm asking or why I'm asking, and you answer that question, you could be 180 degrees off from the right answer. So why not make it a dialogue? Why not make it a conversation like the conversation that you would have when you met somebody for the first time in a social setting? You want to know something about them, they want to know something about you. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask clarification. It's so important to make it sound and act and feel like it's a dialogue. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you just be yourself. But please don't act like it's an oral exam and you're just there to answer questions. It won't go well for you in most cases. All right, my third bullet point, ask the $1 million question. I've asked my kids to do this and they've had success with it. I've recommended this to colleagues and friends, and almost universally people have come back and told me that this has been a very successful approach. And here's what I mean by the $1 million question. Almost immediately, the interviewer is going to ask you a basic question. A lot of times that basic question is just tell me something about yourself, but there's going to be some kind of icebreaker question that the interviewer is going to ask you. When that question gets asked, I want you to immediately answer that question with a question. When that interviewer asks you to tell him something about yourself, I want you to come back with this question. I would love to answer your question, and I will answer your question, but I'd like to ask you, what are you looking for in a candidate? That's the most important part. What are you looking for in a candidate? It should roll off your tongue, and it should be front end loaded to the beginning of the conversation. Now, why am I telling you to do this? Well, it's critically important for you to know what that person wants from his candidate, so that when you answer his questions, you're answering the questions that meet his needs. So if he says that I'm looking for a candidate who is a great leader and who's empathetic, from that point forward, every time you answer a question, you should be describing some leadership characteristic in your answer or some empathetic characteristic in your answer. If you're not doing that, you're not meeting his needs and you're not going to set yourself apart. Now, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people where they say, well, I just don't feel comfortable asking that question right up front. And I can understand that it could be awkward. But I would also tell you that whenever somebody asked me that question, I was more than happy to answer that for them. And you should be more than willing to ask that question because, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, we're looking for a good fit on both ends of this equation. If that person is not willing to tell you what he's looking for in a candidate, then that would set off a red flag for me. Why isn't he willing to tell me what he's looking for? And what does that mean for me if I do get this job? Are there going to be other things that he wants that he's not going to share with me? So I think anybody who really wants to have a great fit will be willing to tell you what they're looking for. I know it's really bold to do this, but I almost guarantee that you'll be successful if you ask this question right up front in the beginning of the interview. Okay, next bullet point. Everybody shows you results, but hardly anybody can explain how they got there. This is almost like when you were in the 5th grade and your teacher was giving you credit for how you solved the math problem. We all know as employers that sometimes not so great employees can get good results just because they happen to be in the right place at the right time. And we also know that there are great employees that have a hard time sometimes getting something because of a set of circumstances. So don't just show your results, but be able to explain the process. Here's what I did to cause that good thing to happen. Here are the things that I did. And this even applies to a kid coming out of college. Here's what I did to get to that 3.7 GPA. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm doing. To be able to explain that is really important. Okay, proof sources. I get asked this question a lot. Should you have proof sources? In my mind, this is part of the preparation. If you're talking to the HR department, you're finding out about the interviewer, you should inquire whether or not that person wants to see any kind of letter of recommendation or certificate or stack ranking or award that you received. Don't force it on the person. If you get asked to provide some references and some certificates of achievement, then have them ready. And when the person asks, have them at your fingertips and be able to show them. But don't necessarily force them on the person, because you have to make sure that through this course of a dialogue, when you're talking to the interviewer, that you're meeting that person's needs and not wasting his time. And again, I grew up in a life of sales, and I know that if one of my salesperson tried to show something about a product before the customer ever really even thought that they needed the product, that the customer would kind of zone out. So before you're going to show some proof of what you've done, you have to make sure that that interviewer is ready to receive that third-party validation, or it won't mean anything to them. So proof sources, I'd have some. I'd be ready to show them, but I wouldn't necessarily force them on anybody until asked. Okay, I'm going to wrap up by talking a little bit about what I've done since I've retired. Jim asked me to share this information with you. I'm actually very proud of what I've been able to do, and I've agreed to share some of this information because it does have some similarities to this concept of preparing for an interview. And it should also show you that there's nothing in the world that you can't do if you prepare yourself to do it. And that's why I decided to show it. Now, I grew up and spent my time in medical device sales for over 35 years. And I would have, if you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago, if I would have left that to begin a second life in agriculture, I would have laughed at you. I would have said, you got to be kidding me. But I knew when I retired that I still had some gas left in the tank, and I knew I needed to have something that was going to be mentally and physically challenging. And so through the course of dialogue with my wife, we decided to start a vineyard. And we planted this vineyard that you see in this picture in 2017. And I got to tell you, it has been a fantastic experience. It hasn't always been good. I've had my challenges, and I've had my failures. I've had things go right, and I've had things go wrong. But it's been one heck of a ride. And the reason that I'm including this in here is because for all of you that are on this line that are in a transitional situation where you're looking for the best fit for you, don't be afraid to try something different. I spent all of 2016 doing my homework. I spent a lot of time going to classes. I talked to people from Texas A&M University to learn what I could from them. I networked with colleagues that had already done this. I did all of those research steps that I talked to you about earlier in this presentation in order to make sure that when the time came and I had the interview with Mother Nature, that I was going to be able to be semi-successful, and I have been, and I'm proud of that. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't spent literally a whole year making sure that I took the time to understand what I was getting myself into. So I share that with you because if you are in the situation where you're transitioning from one position to another, this might be an opportunity for you to see that it can be done. I never knew anything about agriculture before I did this, and it's been really fun to try something different. Okay, so that is my presentation. Jim, I am going to turn it back over to you. I think you have an announcement, and then we might have some time for some questions.
Yeah. So first of all, we're going to have the Q&A, but I wanted to at least introduce you to our next webinar presenter. Her name is Margaret Graziano, and it's going to be on April 1st at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And her topic's going to be maximizing your job effectiveness. And I'll tell you what, I have known Margaret now for 15 plus years, and let me tell you something. Well, I first saw her doing a keynote at a convention I was at, and it was off the charts, exhilarating. She knew her stuff, and she had the audience, I'm telling you, on the edge of their seat. I said, I got to get to know this gal. And so, and I did. I got to know her, and I've got to know her really well over these last 15 years. And she's even had me attend a couple of her leadership conferences and all this stuff. And I'll tell you, I've been continually impressed with really what she's doing in her company, and really the impact that she's making on executives and corporations for reaching their full potential with the human capital that they have. And so she's got a tremendous background, and I'll tell you, the other thing is that it's no surprise to me when she was just honored recently as one of the top 100 female business leaders in the Silicon Valley, and just really, really impressed and really excited about that seminar. So we'll be putting out her bio. You'll be seeing that, and that'll be next month. So the other thing, just before I get to the Q&A, I just wanted to touch on something that Mark said. His presentation was on preparedness, and I can tell you this for a fact, and we tell our clients this, is prior to Z1 Career Zone, I had a executive recruiting firm for 18 years. And let me tell you why I know that the number one reason, okay, why people get hired is because they're the most prepared. And the reason why I know this, okay, is every time one of our candidates got hired, we went right back to that hiring manager, and we're talking nearly 4,000 professionals into new jobs over that time, okay? Went right back to every one of them, said, tell me, Sarah, tell me, what was the number one reason why you hired Liz? Okay, Bob, what was the number one reason why you hired Mark? Or Margaret, tell me what. And I can tell you that 95% of the time it was 3 responses, okay? And the number one response by far was preparedness. So Mark, you're hitting the nail right on the head, and that's exactly right. And I could give you all kinds of stories and situations about that. So enough about that. I'm going to get into the questions. We've gotten a few of them here that came in that I've got jotted down here. So and we've got about 10 minutes here that we can go through these. So Mark, here's the first question. This came in from Kim, okay, and that question is, are there some suggestions you would have on what not to do during interviews that most people wouldn't think about?
Well, I think I've already said it. Well, actually, let me try to give you some additional new information.
Yeah.
I would tell you that I'm perfectly comfortable with somebody being nervous in an interview. Nerves are a human thing, and it's bound to happen to all of us. But with that said, I would ask that you prepare enough so that you can minimize the amount of nerves. And if you find yourself having a strong case of nerves, take a deep breath and talk to the person about how important the job is and how much you would like to be successful. And I have found that the best way to eliminate nervousness is to have a dialogue. I know when I was interviewing people and I was talking to young people and I could tell that they were nervous, I would try to shift gears and talk about something personal. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do in your spare time? Because I have always found that when you shifted gears and went that direction, it would help the person be a little less nervous because they'd be talking about something that they were very comfortable with. So that would be my suggestion. There's lots of other things that I would tell you, tips in an interview. It's important to make eye contact. It's important to have a firm handshake. It's important to look the person in the eye. It's important to, here's another tip. It's important to dress professionally. You notice I've got a tie on. I don't need to wear a tie. There was nobody that asked me to wear a tie, but call me old school. I think having your best appearance, no matter what the position is, leaves a favorable impression. And anything you can do to differentiate yourself is a positive thing. So I hope that helps
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah. And Mark, I would just add on one other thing to that, because it goes back to your preparation, right? And I have found, at least for myself, and I've seen this with our clients, is that the more prepared they are, okay, the less nervous you get. I mean, you may still be a little bit nervous, but it's just like doing a presentation. You rehearse that, and you know what slide's coming up. You got all that down, man. The difference in your nervousness is quite dramatic. So I think, again, it touches on that preparedness too. So so here's the next question. This is from Maria. Mark, what do you recommend doing when you have interviewed and you don't hear any feedback from the company or those you interviewed with for a week or two? What do you think the best way is to follow up without feeling that you are being too pushy? Good question.
I think it's a great question. But I think, okay, so a couple things. First of all, I do not think that it is inappropriate for you to ask at the end of your interview what the next steps are and when the expectation would be for you to hear something from them. I think that's critically important to close your conversation with the person you're interviewing with by setting the expectation on when you're going to hear something and who you're going to hear it from. Because if you set that expectation and the interviewer says, well, you should hear something back from us in 48 hours. Well, he's just opened up the door so that at the end of 48 hours, if you haven't heard anything, then you are within your rights based on the expectations set in your conversation to follow up with them. And so it's really critically important when you get to the end of the conversation to set that expectation on what the next steps are and when you're going to hear something. I don't think, see, a lot of people, Marie, think the way that you framed that question, which is you don't want to be pushy, but I don't know if I ever took it that way. I think executives get busy. I think life happens, and sometimes that conversation you had with that person ends up getting put on the shelf. And if you follow up, it to me always showed initiative. To me, it showed somebody who really wanted to get closure. And it was a reminder to me that my job wasn't done. So, I would tell you, even if you didn't set that expectation, I don't know if I would describe it as being too pushy if you followed up. I think it actually would show initiative and it'd show a good thing. But the safe bet is to set that expectation on when you're going to hear and who you're going to hear, and then you're totally within your rights to follow up if it didn't happen in that time frame.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Here's the next question. This one's from Will. Do you have any recommendations as to how to best handle a situation where you think you are not being considered to move further in the interview process because of your age? And I'll tell you, this is coming up a lot. This is a really great question, and they've even got a term for this now. It's called ageism, right? So Mark, any recommendations that you have there on how best to handle that?
Yeah, so I guess there's a common theme in my answers that if you take an action early in the process, it helps you to solve some of these problems later in the process. So as part of your research, if you think that age could potentially be an obstacle, I would recommend trying to sort that out as early as possible. And chances are you're going to be told we're open to all ages, whether you're too young or too old. Chances are that's going to be the response, to which there's always another chance for you to catch it, and that's in this dialogue that you have with the interviewer. Again, right up front, what are you looking for in a candidate? If a candidate says that he's looking for somebody with 10 years of experience, and you know you don't have that, as a part of that interview dialogue, you need to address it. Ask the question. You told me you're looking for a candidate with 10 years of experience. Why is that? And if you think that you can overcome that in the interview, that's the time to handle it as part of the dialogue.
Yeah.
So I'm answering your question by giving you some suggestions about how to be proactive about it before it becomes an issue. In my mind, that's the best way to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think that's well said, and it goes for either side of this. The ageism I was telling you about is really individuals over 40 years old, right? That are having trouble because of their age with other companies that are hiring younger people, right? So it was great feedback that you gave, Mark, on that, because it does go both ways there.
So Jim, let me add, because I actually had somebody who sent me a note on LinkedIn about this. They felt like they weren't being considered because they had too much experience. So let me just say this. I think I can say this because I'm in that category. For some reason, there's a negative stereotype in some cases about older people, and I think largely that stereotype is that they aren't willing to work as hard, or maybe they get stuck in a rut and they lose their creativity, and or they're and that typically gets fed back to you as you're overqualified. But let me just tell you that this goes back to what I said earlier in my presentation about how important it is for you to talk about attributes and not experience. If you've lived your life as an energetic, creative person, that doesn't go away as you age. I can tell you, as somebody who's over 60, that if you've led an energetic life, you're still going to be energetic. You're not going to immediately start sitting in an easy chair for 24 hours a day just because you turned a certain age. So to be able to express what it is about you that's caused you to be successful, quit talking so much about the experience and start talking about how you energize people, how you bring new ideas to the table, how you, all the stereotypes that you think you have to battle against because of your age. Address those issues and talk about the attributes that you can bring. And I think that's the best way to overcome the old age factor anyway.
Okay, that's great, Mark. I've got a couple others here. Just going to tell you guys, there's a bunch of questions that have come in. We're not going to get to all of them, but we'll follow up with you individually one way or another here. So this is a good question by Ron. How much can you prepare on companies that are startups? Good info and employees are hard to find in those situations. That's a really good question.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing that I said in my presentation is that you have to do an assessment of your fit with the opportunity that you're looking for. Not everybody has the risk tolerance to go into a startup company. If you have a young family and your priorities are going one direction, you may not have the risk tolerance to start with a startup. On the other hand, it may be right up your alley. You may say, hey, if I do this, I have the best chance of becoming incredibly wealthy as I get older. It starts with your assessment. And why am I saying that? Well, I'm saying that because your observation is 100% accurate. You can't get as much information about a startup as you can a 100-year-old company, right? Because right. They haven't formed their culture yet. They haven't created their all of these stability items. They might not even have an HR department.
Right.
That's inherent with the risk associated with being a startup. So if you're tolerant of that risk, then the way to approach it is, hey, I can help you create the culture. So Mr. Interviewer, what kind of culture are you trying to create? Oh, great, because I'm great at that. So let me come on board and help you with that. But you have to understand that, if you're worried about too much risk and you can't find out those kinds of information, then maybe that's not the right company for you to be looking at.
Yeah, no, great. We're going to do two more here. Got one here from Ramon, and question is, are there any questions about the company you are interviewing with that you would deem as off limits?
Ask the question one more time, Zaz. I'm sorry.
Okay. Are there any questions about the company you're interviewing with that you would deem as off limits?
Okay, so that's a great question.
Pretty interesting question.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So what my advice would be is that most of the time, if you feel like you have good instincts, you should let your instincts determine what types of questions you can ask to what types of people. If this company has a reputation for taking risks, for being gun blazers, then they might not be as willing to answer questions about risk. And you may be seen as not a good fit if you're asking questions about risk. But generally speaking, if it's important to you in determining whether this is going to be a good fit for you, you need to find somebody in the company that will answer that question for you. And I think I said it earlier, but if I didn't, let me say it now. Jim can tell you that most people don't leave a company. They leave the manager that they're working for because they don't have a good fit with that manager. So if you feel uncomfortable asking the guy who's interviewing you, who is going to probably be your manager, a question about something that's really important to you, then you have to ask yourself, is this the right fit for me? I keep coming back to, if that person hires you, you have to have enough of a relationship with that person to be able to ask the things that are important to you. So why not test fire that in the interview process?
Yeah. No, that's great. We're going to do this last question. This is a great question. And this came from somebody named Anonymous. So first of all, thank you for your presentation, Mark. Very, very valuable information. But here's my question. Are you producing wine yet? And if so, how do we join the Desperado Wine Club? Also, how did you come up with the Desperado name, and what does it mean? And I'm assuming this has something to do with being an Aggie. How's that for a question? Final question.
Well, the part that assumes that being an Aggie is getting into this whole venture in the first place. Somebody with a better education might not have done it. But with that said, I do not have wine yet. My family and I, we're going to go from harvest directly into fermentation. This year is going to be our first year. So that'll be the July timeframe. We'll have harvests, and those grapes that you saw in that one picture are going to go right into fermentation tanks this year. We're going to make 4 kinds of wines, a red, a couple of rosés, a white. Typically it takes 12 to 18 months for whites and rosés. It takes 2+ years for reds. So with a little bit of luck and the grace of God, the winter of 2021, we should have some wine for everybody to taste. I'm very excited about it. As you can see, you have to have some patience in this whole process. It takes some time. And then finally, the Desperado name came from my wife and I, during a brainstorming session, we are raising Spanish grapes. We're going to be making Spanish wine. And so we wanted to have a Spanish term. Descarado means cheeky or sassy in Spanish. And since all the women that I know in my life are cheeky and sassy, I figured that was a good fit. Even my dog is a little sassy. So that's why we went with Descarado.
That's great. Well, anyway, just Mark, first of all, thanks for doing this. It was great. I've taken notes here, and we're gonna follow up with everybody on this. Thank you all for attending this, and we look forward to the next presentation that's on April 1st. And again, if you've got any questions for us at all, again, email us info@z1careerzone.com. We'll get back to you. And for those that did send in questions, there's a bunch of them. We didn't get to you, we'll follow up with you directly on those. And if it's something that could really benefit everybody else, we'll share that with everybody. Okay?
Or Zaz, I could also say, if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm on LinkedIn, and so I can be reached there too. And I'll share that information with you too, Jim.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks everybody for being on this. Have a great day, and we'll see you in a few weeks. All right. Stay safe, stay quarantined. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you again.